Welcome to Microsoft SaaS Stories. I'm your host, Jason Young, a curious engineering manager here at Microsoft. And in this episode with CloudMaker, we'll hear how early user feedback and agility are key when building a new product. Today I'm here with Nick Smith, co-founder and CEO at CloudMaker. How's it going, Nick?
Hey, Jason, I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Pretty good, pretty good. It's a nice sunny day here, and the weekend is coming up. Today's Friday, so I'm always excited. I mean, I do enjoy my work, but the weekends are nice too, aren't they?
Yeah, nice chance to recharge for sure.
Exactly. So let's just jump into it. And I want to understand what your company focuses on and what product or products do you have?
Yeah, so CloudMaker is an AI-powered visual cloud automation platform. We enable enterprises to rapidly model Azure cloud infrastructure as a diagram, so visually. So essentially, we're abstracting the requirement to write all of that complex infrastructure as code and really keeping engineers in that language that all of us engineers understand, which is diagramming. CloudMaker then does all the heavy lifting of under the hood, compiling the infrastructure as code, and even helping engineers create secure solutions with our AI-powered security scanning engine. And also helping them deploy to the cloud as well. So our powerful deployment engine also assists in that process too.
Yeah, and just to help people visualize this, I mean, it's kind of like Visio. We always do diagrams in like Visio or in like draw.io or in some other tool. And then we have to go through the process of taking that diagram and converting that into an ARM template or a Terraform template or whatever it might be. And what you've done is you've made it so that when you do the diagram, like that is basically your production or test configuration or whatever, and you can export that or you can just deploy right to the cloud.
That's exactly it. And in my first career, I founded a cloud MSP, and that workflow that you've just described is exactly the workflow that CloudMaker sits on top of. And they were the challenges we were facing. In that MSP business, is you can draw the diagram. Every engineer kind of is cloud aware and can model the infrastructure. But coming to write that detailed infrastructure as code, really it requires those very, very skilled engineers that combine developer skill set with cloud infrastructure knowledge. And they were super hard to find, which was really the motivator for us to go out and build CloudMaker.
Yeah. And I love a tool like this because it's so easy. If you're using a whiteboard, you get incredible flexibility, but you can also draw boxes that are things that don't actually exist in the real world. So it's really nice being grounded in the reality of the platform that you're dealing with and making something real. So it's a really cool product. So this is probably kind of a silly question, but what first motivated you to consider a SaaS model? I mean, and I think it's a silly question because was there even a possibility of this not being a SaaS model?
Well, yeah, I mean, not so silly. And I think we've actually worked back to front in that sense. So, like I said, previously ran a MSP business. And for me, that was the dawn of the cloud, really the start of where organizations and enterprises were fed up of taking all the technical and commercial risk of building their own systems and really wanted to make that someone else's problem. And we built a healthy business around building those solutions and delivering it back to organizations as a service. And I think SaaS kind of really is in the same vein. Mm-hmm. Organizations want the outcome. They want the value of the software without taking all the technical and commercial risk of building the complex systems to support that software. Mm-hmm. I think we always envisage CloudMaker as being a SaaS platform to be able to deliver the power of what we're building, easy cloud solution design, easy cloud solution deployments, but without customers having the need to build all of that complex infrastructure under the hood. So we were a SaaS first company when we launched, and I think for many of our customers, that is the perfect delivery model. But we are also seeing larger enterprises that have specific governance and security needs that actually want the software within their own data boundary. And for that, we've actually created a self-installable version of CloudMaker, but essentially as a virtual appliance. So it's as easy to deploy. It's very easy to deploy, but it's deployed into the customer's Azure environment. And I guess like private SaaS is not a lot of complex infrastructure to manage.
I see. So it's still SaaS, but who is managing it? They're managing it, or you're managing it?
Yeah, so it's essentially a very small containerized system, so that
Okay.
it's a small infrastructure footprint to manage. So where there's those scenarios that the customer really does want it in their tenant, there's a small footprint that they have to manage, but it's a
Yeah.
very simple thing to manage essentially.
Okay. That's an interesting insight. That's very cool. And then let's double click into like what you built, how you built it, and how did you leverage the Microsoft tech stack?
Yeah. So we've talked about the product. So as you've mentioned, imagine Visio CloudMaker at its heart is this beautiful design system. It allows you to drag and drop, click and connect Azure cloud solutions together very, very quickly. We've got AI in our product, so our Overwatch security engine is powered by OpenAI. So as you're designing and configuring, we're surfacing up security recommendations and highlighting areas where customers are not adhering to security best practices. And we're also about to release our natural language copilot, also leveraging OpenAI as well, which enables engineers to talk to CloudMaker, and CloudMaker can actually create these solutions on behalf of customers. But under the hood, we're 100% Azure. We're Azure first startup. We're actually on the Azure startups program for a couple of years, and really Azure enabled us to rapidly deploy our infrastructure and therefore our application on top of that. And we're leveraging things like app services, AKS, the classic storage and key vaults. We've just shifted to a Postgres solution for our database under the hood. So that's really the approach that we've taken. We're picking the right compute for our needs, and app services were perfect for our initial needs. But as we scale and become more complex, we need a more powerful compute engine with things like AKS, and then the very flexible PaaS database services that Azure providers is really powering the kind of data layer of CloudMaker.
Yeah, I'm just picturing all of your engineers using your own software to like redesign it, like delete app service, drag and drop AKS.
Well, absolutely. We dog food CloudMaker.
Yeah.
As we were developing the product, we were dog fooding it ourselves to get it to a point where, is this a product that other engineers can use? So it's very simple for us to modify, our infrastructure design, because all the team are doing it visually, and all of our engineers love working with CloudMaker, even though they can do infrastructure as code, and they're hardcore cloud experts and software engineers. They still prefer to use the CloudMaker environment.
That's awesome. I really love that. And then what is the pricing model that you use?
So we have a few plans for CloudMaker that are differentiated by features. So we have a small plan for kind of individual engineers or small teams. We then have a business plan that's for a slightly larger team with a few more features, and then we have our enterprise plan. And on our SaaS plans, that is charged on a monthly and annual basis, depending on which plan you want. We're about to introduce some value-based pricing in there for some of the new features that we've got coming. So even people on the lower plans can access some of the powerful features that currently only enterprises can access, but will be limited on usage, and they can buy more tokens. And then our self-hosted flavor of CloudMaker is actually today billed on an hourly basis. So you pick the size of the appliance that you want to deploy, the number of vCPUs, and then through the Azure Marketplace, that customer will get charged on an hourly basis for those for the size of appliance, essentially.
What I found interesting there, you mentioned, it sounds like the users that are on a non-enterprise plan, they can use some of the features sort of a la carte and sample them. Can you double click into that a little bit more?
Yeah. So the way that SaaS works is you can sign up, you get a free trial. You get pretty much all, you don't get all of the enterprise features in the free trial, but you can request them and we can unlock those for you once we've spoken to you and kind of qualified the opportunity. But typically customers coming in on the free trial can access all of the rich features. At the end of the trial, you pick the plan you want, you get the features that you pay for. But what we're seeing in the SaaS world more and more, obviously, is the pricing model that most people kind of start with is this kind of per user pricing. And if your app kind of delivers value on a individual by individual basis, then that can work. But for a product like CloudMaker, where really the value that you get out of CloudMaker is, you have maybe a small cloud team, but you're getting a big impact by being able to deliver more. The value of CloudMaker is actually being able to rapidly design solutions, check them for security issues, import your cloud solution so you can go and discover what you've already got and bring it into CloudMaker. Do deployments, that kind of thing. So the value is all of those pieces. And what I really want to drive within our commercial model is enabling even the smallest organization to access those very rich features, but they pay for what they use. So a small organization might use a few of those things, so they pay less. A bigger organization will use a lot of those things, so they'll pay more. So for us as a business, we can monetize all of this value that we have in CloudMaker, but from the customer's perspective, they're not worrying about, oh gosh, I've got to add another user to CloudMaker. It's all about the value that they're deriving from the product. So I think it's a very powerful pricing strategy. And I think for us, some of the lessons that we had to learn before we got to that point was, what are your value metrics? How do you cost and price these things? They're all the lessons that you have to learn, post launch of your product. And thankfully, we've now learned a lot of those lessons, and we're about to start implementing them into CloudMaker.
Yeah. The reason I asked about that, I really like that because I do see rigid pricing structures at a lot of companies where sometimes those tiers, there's big jumps and it's just like, oh, I just want this one feature. And, it can be just like this jump that's just not possible. So then they start looking at other products. So by allowing them to, sort of customize it just a little bit, it's like, I'm starting with this tier and then I'm adding these features. I think that's pretty powerful. I bet your customers really like that.
Well, from what we're discussing with them, so we haven't implemented value-based pricing yet, but from what we're discussing, there's a lot of interest in that approach. And I guess it's a complex thing, pricing your SaaS application as a startup, right? We've not got a long history of being a big business with a traditional software product that used to be on-prem that we're moving to SaaS. We're a young startup that's validating our product every day with our customers. And we have to be very agile with our pricing and commercial model. We're not afraid to change it where we see opportunity. But also we have to be alive to, we're in business to make money, right? We need to get to profitability. We need to sustain profitability and we need to grow. So how do we achieve that? And whichever commercial model you choose really has to support, that strategy. And some of the things you have to weigh up are we giving away too much for free here? Are we struggling to move people up through, the value chain and purchasing more of CloudMaker? But I feel like once you've attained the data and the intel, and you understand how to what your value metrics are and how you price them, then you can implement a model like this where you can have confidence, where people can start small. There's an easy on ramp. They get all the benefits. They experience all the transformational power of a product like CloudMaker, but then can grow as their company grows. They can grow as they onboard more teams. They can start to move through the value chain.
Right, and everybody wins at that point. So as you were building this, as you've been going on this SaaS journey, what were the biggest challenges? And then do you think that those were business, technical, a little bit of both?
Yes, so I think both. I'd say, I don't know if it's 50-50, but we have certainly faced both technical and business challenges. So, everything from, the company started with, a high fidelity mock-up that I did. I'd class myself as an old school IT pro, used to rack and stack, servers, became an Exchange, enterprise architect. That is my background. I'm not a UI developer, a UX designer. But had a real vision for what we wanted to build, and myself and my co-founder, we sat down, we put together a high fidelity mock-up, of what we wanted to build with all the roadmap features that we were going to include. But then really the rubber hits the road, and like, how do we build this thing? What is the technology that drives this? And we started out very naively, like, it's a drawing system. Let's get a drawing framework. It's you drop something on the diagramming surface, it's going to spit out a code block for that specific resource provider in Azure. But no, that's not the reality of the world. Resource providers are, not very reliable all the time. Lo and behold, they're not always documented in the right location. There's multiple versions of the truth of Azure resource providers. So, how do we build a automated system to retrieve those and build them into the product? We've had other, challenges that you probably wouldn't expect. How do people draw diagrams? Drawing a product like Photoshop or Figma, very much geared towards product design, but when you're doing cloud solution design, how do people actually want to lay out their network diagram? And when we started, we were very, very opinionated about how that should happen. So we started off with someone would drag a VM from the panel on the left onto the drawing surface, and it wouldn't stick; it would just ping right back. Because what they had to do is actually build the network first, the resource group, then the network, and then the VM. And obviously what we learned very quickly is that that's not how people conceptualize cloud infrastructure. Sometimes they just want to convey a message to a stakeholder, so they just want to drop a VM on there. So these are all the lessons that we had to learn on the technical side. And then really on the business side, as a startup, it's how do you stay alive long enough to get to the point of product market fit and growth? And that's been an ongoing challenge. I'm sure every founder of a startup that's watching this is going through the same thing. So how do you raise money? How do you get in front of investors? How do you pitch your product? How do you build a team? I'm not a software engineer, so how do you recruit that first software engineer into your team? They're all the challenges around the business side, really. And then I think fundamentally as a founder, spinning 100 plates every single day and making sure that none of those plates, fall and smash on the ground, they're hugely challenging. And then I'd say the third set of challenges are personal. Being a founder of a small startup with a little bit of funding, it's hugely challenging. You have to commit your whole life to it. And I have a wife and kids at home. Sometimes they get the rough end of the stick because I'm home late. The kids are already in bed. My wife has been doing all the stuff at home. She's pulling her hair out. Your friendships suffer. You don't have time to see your friends. So there are also the challenges that you have to face as a founder. And I guess I'm very lucky that I have a co-founder. So it's not as lonely as it could be if I was on my own. But we faced all of those challenges and still do on a daily basis.
Yeah. And a shout out to your wife. I mean, she's critical for making sure that this can happen.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like none of this would have happened without my wife. Like she's a very strong individual and we've been together a very long time, from my first startup. But when we met, that was already established, but she still kind of got a sense of what running, a startup was like. So she's been with me through thick and thin, through my first startup, through to the exit of that business and it got acquired and, now onto the second startup and, starting from scratch. And she's still with me and, still supports me every single day. So I'm very grateful.
Yeah. So as you think back, about the journey that you've been on in the business world and the technical world here, is there anything that you wish you had done differently? As our audience is listening and as they're about to make these mistakes, what can they learn from you?
Yeah, really interesting question. I've probably got 1,000 different answers for that. But if I was to boil it down, I would say the things that I would do differently would in our early days would be not burn as fast. So we raised this bit of money and we burned quite quickly because we were excited. We had this idea. Grow the team, we want to get it out there. But what we hadn't done was any demand validation, or any testing with an early prototype. Do people actually want this thing that we're building? We think it's a good idea. And I've got a sense that it's a good idea from my previous business where I was on the coalface and in the trenches and I felt a real need for it. But do other people want this? So we've been through a bunch of iterations. We've pivoted. We've had a big pivot in the early part of our journey, where we just failed to do those kind of basic things, I guess. So I wish I'd known what I know now and had already learned those lessons for this startup, which is, get the prototype built early, release as early as you can, get your marketing website up with the idea that you have in your mind and start doing demand validation. Is this a thing that people want? Are these the features that people need? rather than kind of getting your head down and building something for several months and then realizing, hey, people don't want to just drag a VM and have it snap back. They actually want to draw like this. So
right.
Yeah, I wish I'd done that differently, but I'm a big believer in you learn very little from your successes and you learn a whole great deal from your failures. And we've learned a lot from those mistakes, and now we're putting those into practice, and we're in a much better place now of releasing early, getting cycles of feedback from customers and iterating the product very quickly.
Yeah, basically taking your ability to pivot and moving it as early in the process as possible. I really like that.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to pivot. That's the other thing, right? You bite the bullet early, and the sooner you pivot when you realize that something's not working, the better it's going to turn out for you, really.
Exactly. So, in terms of your engineers, I know you were talking about how challenging it was hiring that first engineer as a non-engineer. And I've seen this happen, by the way, and I've seen companies fail at this. I was basically number 2 at a different company. This was a long time ago. And, I said, how did you hire the first engineer? And they said, oh, he was a nice guy, because they weren't even like software adjacent. And it was just not a good choice at the time. I know how challenging that is to hire that first person. But like, as you hired these engineers, like, how did you get them to think in SaaS, or did they already come in with that background? Like, what was the story there?
So I think I was just very lucky in the end that I met my co-founder Alex, essentially. So, struggling to find, this technical co-founder that could help me, grow this business. And Alex had worked at the big banks as a cloud automation specialist, and then as a software engineer. He had gone back to study a PhD in AI. He then, went back into the commercial world and headed up an AI team at a startup here in London. And I was lucky enough to actually meet Alex at an event my brother was doing. He was running the length of the UK, so Hadrian's Wall, which is up at the north of England. A big event that people like to do is run along the length of Hadrian's Wall. And I was supporting my brother, and Alex was also running that race with my brother, and we got talking in the margins of that. And it was just very lucky that I happened to be there and he was there, and we got talking, and we had this kind of common background, this common vision. It was really at that point, that I had found someone that could help me then start to grow the team and find engineers with this kind of SaaS mindset. But because Alex had already been in a startup, a SaaS product, he had already kind of been through the process of growing a team and seeing that company grow. And then with Alex's help, we were able to find other engineers with that mindset. But fundamentally, what we're looking for is engineers that are aligned to our worldview. This is why we're building the product. These are the advantages that we're trying to deliver. This is how we're trying to change the world fundamentally. So we need people to buy into that vision. And then really, I'd say many modern engineers now are very familiar with the idea of building software for SaaS. So most of the engineers now that we're recruiting have already had experience in building those kind of SaaS software products.
Oh, that's great. You mentioned earlier that you were on app service and you've done some, move some of the pieces over to Kubernetes. But I did want to ask, so I know that's part of your scale strategy, but can we just double click into how you are achieving scale? Like, are you going across regions? Is AKS sort of the foundation for your scale story? Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we started off with a non-containerized version of CloudMaker on app services. Then we've evolved that process so that the app is now containerized into multiple containers for the different services. So really, we can leverage any compute platform that is compatible with containers, which is many today. Even app services actually.
Right.
So today we're multi-region, but in the UK. So we're across the 2 UK regions. We're expanding very rapidly in the US. So we're now looking at our US expansion and leveraging the US regions on Azure. And for us, that's now a very simple process of scaling out, CloudMaker into those regions. Some of the networking pieces become a little bit more complex there. But fundamentally, what Azure is enabling us to do, and containerizing, the application is allowing us to do, is really like, pick your compute platform. As long as you've got the global networking that you need, which you do on Azure, then actually scaling is very, very straightforward.
Okay. And then how do you build this in a secure way?
That is a very good question. So we've been very lucky with the team that we've built around us. So, our senior engineers are all from, big banking or big global system integrator backgrounds. So, our chief automation engineer, he's from Barclays Bank, and he has spent decades building very secure systems for Barclays. Our kind of lead software engineer, he's from KPMG, and he has got a deep experience in building, secure software for one of the big system integrators. So the team that we've built has been very important in terms of how we approach the architecture of the application, how we secure it. But we take like a zero trust approach to the way that we model our networking and the resources, and who can access these resources, just in time administration. All of these best practices around security. No public endpoints for any of the services that we're leveraging, making sure that there's only a single entry point into the infrastructure, and everything else is locked down. So very, very luckily, we've got some deep experienced engineers that can help us architect the solution in the most secure way.
Okay. I like that. Security starting at the talent level, right? So a lot of people will add security last, or if they're doing a really good job, they'll do it at the beginning. And for your team, it started before they even started writing any code, because it was baked into the talent. And I love that.
Yeah. And the other advantages now we're getting as our product is evolving is our Overwatch security engine, which has been trained with OpenAI. Now is giving us all of the insights into how can we make the infrastructure more secure, which is hugely powerful. So obviously we're dog fooding CloudMaker ourselves, and as we're building out new services, we're leveraging that power within CloudMaker. So it's the human talent plus augmentation from these large language models that allow us to actually create very secure software.
Yeah, that's super cool. And then I know you talked a little bit about when you first went into production and some of the feedback you got, but what were there any big surprises when you actually flipped that switch and went into production?
So one of the big surprises for us, I guess, was around authentication and how people actually want to log into the application. So I think when we launched the product, we actually launched a drawing app first of all. So we wanted to get more and more feedback on the drawing dynamics of the application. We kind of published it on Hacker News. We got thousands of people signing up to CloudMaker. And the authentication system that we were using, was really struggling to cope with the inbound volumes of people signing up, and the login flow wasn't super straightforward. There were a whole bunch of edge cases that I think you would only really learn about when you start getting a lot of people trying to access your system. When it's like 3 or 4 of you, you tend to lean on the golden path of this stuff. It's like, oh look, I'm in the app, but. That was super interesting as we went into production. You start getting the bigger scale of users coming into your application. So that was a challenge, and we had to iterate very quickly to overcome that as well. And then I guess kind of non-technical pieces are dealing with the inflow of user feedback. I think a good lesson for any founders out there is like grow a thick skin, like very quickly. Having like 3,000 people sign up and have in-app chat and be able to message you their real thoughts on the application is very overwhelming when you're a small team. We're like a team of 5 people. I was CEO, product manager, customer success manager. I'm like taking all of this in, like trying to handle all of these. So that was hugely challenging as well. I'm not sure how I would have done that differently, other than maybe considered someone helping me on the customer success side, but then as a startup you're balancing like how much can you afford to
Right.
to spend on these resources. But yeah, they were definitely some of the ones that we'd face.
Yeah, it's such a good point. I mean, the loud ones don't necessarily represent the normal user experience, right? Or the
Yeah.
normal customer base. The loud ones are probably most of them are the unhappy ones, and then maybe a few that are happy if you're lucky. They're just so exceptionally happy they're reaching out.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I started in that first startup, that MSP business. One of the hats that I wore in that business was service desk. So, I'm very familiar with, no one ever thanks you for a great service, typically, especially in kind of, IT services. But a lot of people, definitely want to let you know when something's not working or they're annoyed. So I actually gained that thick skin from working in a service desk environment for quite a while.
Yeah.
But yeah, all of that feedback is incredibly valuable. Actually, I really value like very critical feedback. I don't want anything sugar-coated. I don't want any niceties, which you can get when you do user interviews. People don't want to offend you and they're polite. I actually really appreciate that very critical feedback about, this bit of your app is not great. It doesn't do what it needs to do, or I'm frustrated, because obviously we can then iterate very quickly, right? So, I'm a big believer in like very direct feedback and just growing that thick skin and absorbing it all and then putting it into the product process, really.
Okay, cool. And then are you available in the Azure Marketplace?
Yes, we are. So we launched in the marketplace in end of Jan. So we actually were engaged with Microsoft Federal on a federal government project, and they couldn't use our SaaS platform. We're a UK company. It's SaaS. Federal government departments can't use UK SaaS. Certainly not without a lot of hoops going through things like FedRAMP, etc. So we work with the Microsoft Federal team actually to re-architect our application and get it into the Azure Marketplace. So the team, to their credit, worked all through December, like on Christmas Day. I will say I did not ask them to do that, but they were really keen to get the app into the marketplace, and worked on Christmas Day to get it launched. So it was actually in the marketplace in December, but then we actively started marketing it in February, and then very rapidly in February gained our first customers, and we started to see very, very significant revenue growth through the marketplace.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And it's definitely inferred a lot of advantages and benefits for us. Yeah, I'm a big fan of Azure Marketplace.
Cool. That's really good to hear. Well, those were all the questions I had. Anything else that I didn't ask a question that you wanted to mention?
I don't think so, Jason. I think I think you covered all the pieces there. So yeah,
Awesome.
Enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, it's a super cool application. I recommend people go check it out at cloudmaker.ai. And Nick, thank you so much for coming on here and talking to me.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jason. It's great to chat.